Hey everybody, welcome back to Garage Band Guitarists. We are up to a very important lesson, a very important point in this guitar course and in your guitar playing. This lesson is one of those things that's an important threshold between where you were and where you can go. And it's a particularly important, and maybe the most important one, because we're going to do something that's a little bit tougher. Okay, in this lesson and the next. I've split it up into two parts because I want to spend a little bit of time on each one of them and make sure that you got it down, okay? This is the difference between carrying forward to really becoming a guitar player and just kind of getting stuck and never getting past where we've been so far, okay? And so I really want to encourage you to focus on this particular topic and really work on it, okay? Because it's a little bit harder than some other things, but I'm going to guide you. I'm going to give you some tips. I'm going to help you get through it, and we're going to do this together. It's going to be great, and I guarantee if you put some work into it, when you come out the other end, you'll be really happy you did. The topic for the lesson is bar chords, okay? Bar chords, and you may have heard about bar chords already, because you may have heard people complaining about them, how tough they are to play, and how difficult it is to kind of master them. And some people say, I never got the bar chords down. Well, they're making more out of it than it is. I want to say that. But I also want to say that it is a little harder than some of the things that you have learned and you will subsequently learn as you're playing the guitar. So it's going to take a little bit more work than some of the other things. But I want to encourage you, give you this little pep talk here, because bar chords just open up a whole new world of playing the guitar. If you can get them down, and you can, I shouldn't say if, I should say when you get them down, they just change your ability to access so many different songs and play in so many different situations. And just what we're going to learn in the next two lessons is going to be tremendously powerful for your guitar playing repertoire. But there's extensions of them and things that we'll learn later on, not too far away, that'll open up even more territory once you know this kind of basic bar chord setup and you've mastered how to make your hand do it. Okay, that's really what it's all about. And so I want you to sort of convince yourself to bear down on this. You will be glad that you did when we get to the end of it, okay? And like I said, I'm going to give you some tips and stuff before we get done with this lesson that'll help make it easier. And you probably, if you can focus on some of those little tips, you probably won't have as much trouble with this as some people do. And you'll get by it. You will. You just have to have a little bit of gumption and stick-to-itiveness, and you'll do it. It's not that hard, okay? People really make more out of this than they should. But it's a way of holding your hand, and the muscles that are required to do it aren't ones you use. Most people use in their normal kinds of activities in life, and so it takes a little bit of work to build them up to and to get more comfortable with doing this, okay? So just hang on to that. We're going to get there and we're going to do it, okay? All right, so that's the pep talk. Let's go into these big evil bar chords and talk about what they are and how to manage them, okay? First of all, the word bar is B-A-R-R-E, okay? It's the French bar. That's where the word comes from, but other people will write it as B-A-R, but it's really B-A-R-R-E, okay? And so you'll see that around when you read other stuff about guitars. It's B-A-R-R-E, okay? Now, first of all, what are bar chords? What is it that makes them bar chords, okay? Well, it has to do with your guitar and how the strings vibrate to make different pitches. You already know that if we fret a note up higher on the neck, it gets higher. If we play it open, it sounds like that. If we fret it up, it keeps getting higher all the way up, okay? And so that's the concept that's behind this bar chord. Because what's happening when you play a string open, it's vibrating all the way from down here on the bridge all the way to up here on the nut, right? So it's vibrating that whole distance. And when we shorten that distance, then it's only vibrating from where we fret it down to the bridge. And this part of the string up here becomes irrelevant. That's taken out of the equation. We're just using this part down here, and that's why it's higher, because it's shorter, okay? Now, you know that's pretty obvious at this point. But when you're playing open chords, the chords we've been learning so far, there's always been some of the strings that are playing open all the way to the nut. So when we played a D chord, we weren't playing this lowest string up here. We were blocking it or not playing it. And we had 3 that we were fretting here, right, the 3 highest strings. But we were also playing the D string open and the A string open, right? So we had some open strings all the way playing down to the nut, and we had some that we were fretting with our fingers, okay? E, that's another one, okay, where we were playing these 3 notes with our fingers on the B string, the A string. We were playing a B note on the A string. We were playing a E note on the D string with our finger, with our ring finger, and then we were playing a G sharp on the G string with our first finger, right? So we were playing those 3 notes with fretted, but we were also playing E, the low E open, and the B string open, and the E open, right? Now, if we want to play a higher chord, we can't just slide that up, because we're still playing, we wanted to play this is an E, we want to play a F sharp, okay? Well, the note, if we go up 2 frets, we go E, F, F sharp, okay? These 3 notes with our fingers are in an F sharp chord, but we still have those other ones playing open, and so we don't get an F sharp chord when we do that, right? Because we'd have to stop playing those open strings. Well, what can we do about that? Well, the concept is that this nut up here is allowing us to get those right notes when we're playing the E down here, or we're playing a G down here, the middle 3 strings, those are in a G chord, and the nut is defining that. And so what we want to do is we want to bring that nut with us when we slide the chord up, right? And so, for example, I'll just go up 1 fret. So this is, my finger is going to kind of pretend to be the nut. And so when I'm down here, I could play my E chord like that, but now I'm going to bring this nut with me so I can play an F or an F sharp or something. Okay, so I'm just going to move up 1 fret and play an F. And so what I'm doing, I'm going to bring my nut, this is my nut, my index finger, and instead of having it down here where it's open, I'm going to take it on the 1st fret. And now I've kind of just made myself a new guitar that's 1 fret shorter, right? And so if I can play those same strings, with my other fingers, get that same chord, and we'll talk about how to do that in just a second. I can now, instead of having an E chord down here with a nut, I have a new nut, and I've got an F chord, because I'm up 1 fret. That's an F chord. And so now my strings that were open, they aren't open really, because I'm playing them with my bar finger, this bar that I made, okay? So they're open to my bar. Instead of being open to the nut, they're open to my bar. And that's the beauty and the power of a bar chord, is that you bring that nut with you. So now you can play major chords all over the neck. See, I'm just bringing the nut with me. I'm like making a shorter guitar when I do that. I just bring it with me and I can play other chords. And that's what the bar chord is all about. So you can get all these different chords all over the neck, and weird ones that you wouldn't, how the heck do you play an A flat chord? Well, it's pretty easy when you're using the bar. You just move it the right number of frets, and bam, there you are. You've got an A flat chord if you're in the right position, right? Okay, so that's the idea. Now let's look real quick at the notation, and then we'll walk through actually making these with your fingers, okay? The notation for a bar chord, there's a couple different ways you'll see it. And I'll show you the way I'm going to do it, but I just want you to be able to recognize it when you see it in somebody else's notation, because there's different ways that people do this. And there's really two main ways of doing it. The first one is, I think, more traditional, I guess you'd call it, and they put a kind of a, it's like a sideways parentheses. It's like, if you know other music, it looks like a tie. They would call that a tie, so it's just like a parentheses, but it's sideways, and it's stretched over the top of the little chord chart, right? And so that means that there's a bar there. Okay, so there's an example of that, and you'll see that. I'm not going to use that one because I like to just indicate the bar with a straight line across the chord chart like this right here. And so that's what I will do, and I'll just put a 1 on that, meaning that you use your index finger to cover that whole set of strings all the way across the bar. You produce the bar. Okay, and then we'll do other things with our fingers. There's other ways of notating that as well. One of them is where they just indicate the notes that are ringing open to the bar, like this. So there's the first string is played with the bar, and not the first string, the lowest string, the E string, and then the highest two strings are played with the bar. But the other notes are being played by your other fingers, so they won't indicate the bar there, because that's not actually making sound. Okay, but I'm going to use this method right here, so you'll always know that that's a bar, and you're not trying to get that with different fingers or something. You're getting it with a bar across, and that's representing our new nut that we're moving around with us. Okay, so that's the way that you'll see it in this course, but I just want to make sure you knew what you were seeing when you saw another one. Okay, those notation schemes all are showing you the same chord, an F chord. Okay, now an F chord is one where, as I said, you're just moving the nut up basically 1 fret, right? So we're going from an E chord down here to an F chord. We just go up 1 fret like that. Okay, but I don't really want you to start playing bar chords with an F chord, so I'm going to kind of skip over that for a second, because the F chord is probably the hardest bar chord on the whole darn guitar. Okay, and so I want you to start off with something a little bit easier than the F chord, and so we're going to do that somewhere else on the guitar, and we're going to play an A instead. The reason the F is so hard is just because it's out there further. Okay, I actually got a really short guitar for this lesson, so I could make sure you could see it well. But in another guitar, you kind of have to reach out there to get that F, and you got to twist your arm and to try to get that across there, and it's hard. So the farther the guitar is out to your left, the farther the neck is out to the left, the harder it is to play the bar chord. And so when you're learning, it's easier to start on something that's a little higher up on the neck. So this is the hardest one, and then it gets progressively easier as you go up. And that's just the basics of, your arm and your wrist and your fingers anatomy. Okay, and that's just, it just feels easier when you go up here because of the angle of everything. Okay, so we're going to start by moving our nut all the way up to the 5th fret. Okay, this first set of bar chords we're going to learn is named according to the note that you're playing on the lowest string. Okay, so when it's open all the way down to the nut, it's an E, right? That's a note that we've been tuning it to. And so as we go up frets, we can track the notes. So E open, then F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, right? Okay, so A, we're on the 5th fret. And so that note that's coming out of that string is an A, and that's the note that defines this particular part, this particular kind of bar chord. It's named after that lowest note there. Okay, so we're going to do an A bar chord to start with. All right, so let's go through the fingering for this A bar chord. Okay, what you're doing when you do the A bar chord is you're sliding your E form up the neck, okay? And so when we played an E chord, this is how we played it, okay? And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slide that up, okay? So I'm gonna get a nut and I'm gonna bring it with me, okay? So since I'm going up to the 5th fret for the A, my new nut, my bar, is going to be on the 5th fret. It's going to be right there, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? That's what I'm going to do. So all of these strings are being controlled by this new nut, by the bar, okay? I can't get a lower note than that with my bar there. These part of the strings are now irrelevant, okay? It's all going to here, all right? But when we were playing that E chord down there, we were using our first finger as part of forming that chord. But now we're using it for the bar. And so we don't have it available anymore. So we got to finger the rest of the chord differently. So let's go back down to E for a second and not use our first finger and still get the same E chord. And how would we do that? Well, we just have to use our 2, 3, and our 4 fingers instead of our 1, 2, 3. And we get this chord down here. This is the same exact sound, same exact strings and everything of the E chord you were playing. You're just pushing it down with different fingers, okay? So what we have is, we have our ring finger, our number 3 finger, on the 2nd fret of the A string. We have our pinky, our 4 finger, on the 2nd fret of the D string. Okay, and then we've got our middle finger, our number 2 finger, on the G string on the 1st fret. Okay, so it's exactly the same formation. We're just doing it with different fingers, and we get the exact same sound. But now I've got my index finger free to be my bar, and so I can bring it up. So I just bring that up here. Let's just shift this whole thing up 5 frets, exactly what we had with the E. Move it up 5 frets, and we get this. And you can see I've got my bar there, my new, I've got my new nut, okay? And then I've got my fingers in that same position. I just had them down there on E, okay? So now I've got my ring finger on the 7th fret of the A string. I've got my pinky on the 7th fret of the D string, and I've got my middle finger on the 6th fret of the G string. And then the other strings are being played on the 5th fret by the bar. And I've got my A bar chord. Okay. When you do this, you probably are going to do this naturally, but I'll just point it out to you. Put your thumb behind the neck like that, right in the middle, okay? And that's gonna give you the leverage you need to push all of that down. You're gonna push all 6 strings down at the same time. And so you need that pressure point back there in order to compress the strings down on the neck. That's the position for the bar chord, okay? Now because this is based on the E chord that we were playing open, we call this the E form bar chord, okay? So no matter where you're playing it, it's still the E form, even though it's producing an A. So if I said, play an A using the E form bar chord, you'd go here to the 5th fret. But you can play other notes, other chords, with this. So if you go up 2 more, you're playing a B. You go up 1 more, you're playing a C. Okay? That's the same chord as we learned down here, C. But now we're playing it with the bar chord up here. Right? All right, so that's how that works, and you can slide it all over. And it's great because you can get chords that there's not an easy way to play in an open, with open strings at all. I mean, some of them you can't play at all with open strings, okay? But like this would be a G sharp major chord or an A flat major chord. A flat or G sharp, same thing, right? Okay. And there's not an easy way to get an A flat chord with open fingering, okay? And so now you've got all of these different chords, all these major chords you can play doing this, okay? So with our A chord, that's what it sounds like, and it should sound like an old A chord that we used to play down here, this one, right? There's our A, there's our A, okay? So two different ways of playing the same chord, all right? All right, so that's how you do the E form major bar chord, okay? Any major chord you can play using that technique, okay? It's just in a different spot on the neck, all right? Let's do, as long as we're here, let's do the E minor form, okay? Now you remember that we had, this was our E chord, right? And this was our E minor chord, right? Okay. So they're so close together, you can imagine it's not too different when we're doing the bar chord, okay? But we can't use 1 and 2 to do it, okay? So what we do with the minor is we use our 3 and our 4, our ring finger and our pinky, and we put them there where we had 1 and 2, all right? And we're gonna save our index finger to play, to be the bar, to be the nut, right? And so we've got the same chord, but we got our first finger to be the nut. So let's go up where we were playing that A, up here, playing the A bar chord, bar in the same place. And so now we're just gonna basically just lift up our middle finger, and we've got our 3 and our 4 already on the spot we need for the A minor chord, for the minor chord. So there's our A minor bar chord. You can't see, but I'm not using this finger, okay? That's all there is to it, okay? So now you just learned 2 bar chord forms, the E and the E minor form bar chord, but you actually just gave yourself another 20 chords. That's why the bar chords are so powerful, okay? Because now we've got, we had E minor and E down here, but now we've got A minor, and we've got G minor, we've got C minor, we've got A flat minor, okay? And so we've got all these chords. Every single fret is another chord. And so we've picked up 10 additional chords just by learning this one thing and knowing that we can slide it around to get the other chords, all right? That's what's so great about bar chords, okay? So there you have it. That's the basics of bar chords. And like I said, it'll take some practice to get them, but I would really encourage you at first, when you're just trying to get them down, to try to do them up here on 5 or 7 or 6, up in there. That'll be the most comfortable spot for you to actually practice getting your hand into these positions and sliding it around a little bit. Okay? All right, so that's the first part of bar chords. Now, we're going to learn a different kind of bar chord in the next lesson, but before we do, let me give you those couple of tips that I think will be really helpful to you as you're trying to do this, okay? Because it can be a little bit challenging, okay? The first tip is you don't really have to press all the strings down with your bar, okay? It seems like you would. It's being a nut. The nut contacts all the strings, right? But when you're playing a bar chord, you don't have to push them all down. Why? Because your other 3 fingers, when you're playing the E form, okay, your other 3 fingers are pressing down some strings above the nut. And so the nut, the bar, doesn't have to push those ones down because they're being superseded by these strings anyhow, okay? So what goes on down from where you're pushing these strings down is irrelevant, right? And so on the bar, when you're playing the E form one, you really only have to push down the first one and then the top 2, because the other 3 strings are being covered by these 3 fingers, right? And so it doesn't have to be such a flat bar across there all the way. It can be kind of curved, right? Because you don't have to worry about getting those ones in the middle down on the fret, okay? It's going to happen because of these fingers. They're going to get fretted up here. All right, and that just makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to be pushing so hard and getting the whole darn thing down. You just got to get the ones on the end, and it'll sound exactly the same. All right, so that's one tip, that it makes you feel a little bit easier. When you do the E form, E minor form, okay, not the E one, you've got another string you got to push down. So that one gets a little bit tougher, right? Because you can't ignore that G string. You've got to get that one down with your bar 2 up here. But still, you don't have to worry about these 2, and it can make it a little bit easier. Okay. But you got to get that. You got to get that note down on the G string, because that's the one that makes it a minor chord, right? That's the one we changed to get the minor chord. So you got to get that one down. Okay. All right. That's, again, I'm playing, even though I'm talking about the E minor form, I'm playing A minor and A when I'm doing it on the 5th fret. Okay, just want to make sure I'm clear about that. Okay, so that's tip number 1. The second tip is when you are practicing these, especially in the beginning, sit down and hold your guitar up high, okay, and hold your neck up higher. Okay, if you have your guitar down here like this, you have got to twist your arm down a lot more to get the bar chord, right? But if it's up like this, it's much more comfortable. You can move your arm around. And so you may want to put a strap on your guitar and get it up high. Put a short, make your strap short and get it up high while you're learning these bar chords, so that they're here instead of down here where you're kind of have to straighten your arm and twist your wrist more. Okay, so that's the second tip. Get that guitar up, get it angled up, and it'll be a lot easier when you're learning how to do it. Okay, you just have more leverage and you don't have to twist your wrist as much. Okay. Third tip is, and I've already said this, but I just want to reinforce it. Start by practicing those ones that are up higher on the neck. 5th fret and 7th fret up here. Okay? You can start working your way down as you feel more comfortable with it. But when you're first just trying to get the pattern down and get your hand into the position and get comfortable with that, go up higher, 5, 7, 9, up in here, okay? Now, as you get higher and higher, it starts to get tougher in a different way, because the frets get closer and closer together as you go further up the neck. And so it gets harder to, fit your fingers in there, get them all crammed in there. That's why it's easiest in this kind of 5 to 7 range, okay? Because it's high enough up, you're not twisting your wrist, but it's not so high that your fingers are really crammed in there, okay? Now, eventually you'll work your way down to F and it'll be fine. But first, just try starting with this until you're feeling a little bit comfortable with it. And then you can go and try your F and things like that. Okay? I think that's about it for E form bar chords. Okay? Extremely powerful, like I said. And we're going to, once we have these down, we're going to build off it to learn how to play other chords with a bar. And it's just, every time you learn a new bar chord, you're learning 12, 11, 10 chords with each one you learn. And so even though it takes more to learn the bar chord, it's still less effort than learning 10 other chords, okay? And so you're really getting a bargain when you learn bar chords, because it's, buy one, get 10 free, basically, okay? And that's why they're so useful. Okay, we're going to do another form, not the E form. We're going to do something called the A form in the next lesson. You can probably guess what that might be based on what it's called. But when we put those two together, I mean, wow, in terms of what you can do and the songs that this is going to open up for you and the extensions of those, wow, it's really going to make a huge difference in your guitar playing and your ability to access different kinds of music. So that's it for the first bar chord lesson. See you on the next one.